everybody. I'm Josh Constine, and I am the editor-at-large for TechCrunch. Thank you for that warm introduction. So today we're going to be discussing opportunities for new startups and how to pitch them. Because I think one of the most important parts of a startup, regardless of what you're building, is how you communicate it. That's because a startup is nothing without its pitch. That's because at the beginning or even years into your journey, its true value doesn't exist yet. It's your pitch of its potential, of the potential of your whole team. That's all you have originally. And whether you're an entrepreneur, a startup employee, somebody trying to figure out what they want to do next, or even a government official trying to pitch a project to your boss, you all need to know how to pitch effectively. And I'm going to give you the secrets, the rubric, the formula to how you can make anybody believe in what you're trying to build. So I hear that a lot of you guys are founders, and I'm sorry, it's going to be a difficult journey. Every startup has tons of ups and downs, and we're so used to evaluating ourselves relatively rather than in absolute terms. We think, oh, if something went wrong yesterday, how am I ever going to survive? If an executive leaves or a partner drops out, if some new competitor launches or a bug hits your system, it's easy to think, oh, I'm never going to be able to succeed. But that's why I want you to know so much about this strategy for pitching, because not only are you going to be able to pitch other people, you're going to be able to pitch yourself every morning when you got to get out of bed. So why should you trust me in the first place? Well, I'm the editor-at-large for TechCrunch, and for the last 7.5 years, I've reviewed thousands of startups from all over the world. And by watching these companies go through the cycle of being just an idea to someone pitching to me over my kitchen table, to them presenting in front of investors and gaining funding, launching into the market, having that success or the failures, and then growing large enough to maybe either fail and evaporate or hit their IPO or get acquired, and then seeing those founders go back again and do it all over, I've started to see what really works. And I've written over 4,000 blog posts about startups, and I've watched thousands of them pitch at accelerators like Y Combinator's Demo Day. And I'm also the world's most cited technology journalist, according to TechMeme. And so I hope that gives you the confidence that what I'm telling you is what really matters, because I've asked all the best VCs in Silicon Valley, what is it they look for when they want to get pitched? And every time a company comes to me and says, we want to be in TechCrunch, this is how I evaluate them. So every startup team member is the chief storytelling officer. That's because you never know when you're going to have to pitch and who's going to be available. It's not just the CEO. It could be anybody with the exposure to a new investor or a potential client or partner. And a lot of people think of the product as being the heart of the startup, but really the product is the brain. It's your pitch that's the heart that pumps blood to the rest of the startup. Because with a strong story, you're going to be able to will yourself through the darkest moments, and there will be many. With a heroic story, you'll be able to convince people to give up that pesky thing called job security or work-life balance and take a bet to work with you just for equity instead of cash. And a fantastic story can get investors to believe in something that doesn't exist yet for a chance at a fortune tomorrow. And with a simple and concise story, you'll not only be able to convince these other players, but you'll actually be able to convince your users to pitch their friends and grow your product through word of mouth. And it's not just the CEO or the founders. Everybody has to do this. And these same strategies work even if you're not in a startup, even if you're just working in a large corporation or you're a government official. Everyone has to be able to pitch their boss. So you only get so far with this guy. This is the classic startup founder, engineer, product-driven, really focused, but not necessarily the greatest communicator. You've got to have people like this on your team to get their hands dirty and really build the product that you need, but that's not the only person you need. You need somebody like this. Not a blowhard idiot who's going to make crazy claims, but somebody who can, wheel and deal with investors, with the press, who can convince people that something that really is just imaginary today will exist soon enough. And so I'm going to explain to you, why did you even want to pitch in the first place? Because there's a lot of misconceptions. The world doesn't work the same way that it did 10 years ago when startups were this fresh new business and there's only a few coming out each week. Now every day we have over 60 articles a day coming out in TechCrunch, dozens of new startups launching, tons of companies raising huge funding rounds. And so it's not the same atmosphere that it used to be. Instead of being able to grow your user base with press, instead there's other stakeholders who you're really trying to reach. You should be courting press if you need fundraising. Being able to have name recognition with investors that you're potentially pitching goes a really long way to convincing them that you're legitimate. The biggest reason I think the startup should be pitching for press is for hiring, because if nobody sees or can really understand the vision for your company and where it's supposed to be in 5 years, why are they going to take a bet and give up salary to work for you in exchange for equity? And sales. You'll be able to reach clients that you can't directly through your sales team, because people all over the world are reading the tech press, and those decision makers are the ones that read it the most. Yes, the average user, teenagers downloading the newest app, they read some of the tech press too. They'll see it in their feeds, but they're not the ones that are glued to it because they know it's their business. So again, if you're trying to pitch press, you should know that you're not pitching for growth. You're pitching for the tools that will drive your growth in the future. And why do you need to be pitching for funding? Well, first, you don't just want money. You want smart money. You want people who have incredible advice to share with you, who've gone through the trenches themselves and are going to be able to share how they got through their toughest problems. You're going to need their connections, whether it's finding a new VP or closing a big deal or just convincing that new hire that they should come aboard. Those connections from VCs can go a really long way. And finally, you need the signaling. The technology world, unfortunately, has a bit of a herd mentality. Everyone wants to know, does that person think it's smart? Does that person think it's smart? I don't know if I can evaluate this by myself. And so if you can get somebody that others believe is truly brilliant to back you, you actually can skip over the phase of trying to convince them, because they're going to say, hey, that person over there, they know better, and they're already on board. But of course, you're also going to want that money. So I'm going to now break down the steps to an incredible pitch. And it always comes down to these 3 steps: the problem, the solution, and the evidence. And so once you have a startup that people actually want, and we'll talk about some new ideas that you can get for potential startups later, you're going to want to break your pitch down into these 3 parts. First, you have to find a problem and build a hypothesis about how you're going to solve it. That doesn't mean just tinkering in your laboratory. I think one of the biggest mistakes that startups make is that they spend years building their product in secret, with back in their office or in their garage, trying to build something without talking to the real customers. We heard that in our last panel, how important it is to get out of the room, get out of your office, and talk to real people who might potentially want you to use your product. And now you're going to want to pitch your friends and your family because it's easy. It's comfortable talking to them. You know them, right? But the problem is they're going to sugarcoat their responses. They're never going to really tell you the truth. And so if you find that people are telling you, oh, that idea is interesting, or wow, that sounds cool, that means you don't have something that works yet. You want people jumping over the table, grabbing you by the shirt and saying, I need this, I want this, where do I pay for this? I'll do anything to have this. And you don't want to waste your time coding a product or designing a logo or coming up with the perfect startup name until you know you have something people actually want. So once you've got all that, you can work on your problem statement. And it starts with finding what your startup's purpose is. So the one thing that all successful startups have in common is that they truly solve a need. They aren't some idea that the founders just think is cool, and they weren't something that was obviously just going to earn money. Instead, they find a problem and they solve it. So first, you need to clearly explain why there's either a really big pain point for an enterprise market who's going to be willing to pay a ton of money for your service, or you want to be able to solve maybe a smaller pain point, but for a huge audience that you can monetize through microtransactions or advertisements. And the problem shouldn't be something that there's already a tool for. This is what I call linear innovation. You don't want linear innovation. You want something that's really special and different. So with the problem, if you have a clear pain point and emotional resonance, that's how you're going to succeed and convince people that this is what needs to exist. And I think one of the best examples of this was Uber. There were so many clear pain points. And that's why not only Uber, but all the ride-hailing startups around the world have grown so quickly. I think you guys know what it's like. Trying to walk outside and hail a taxi. You never know if you're actually going to find one. They might drive right by you. If they do, once you get inside the car, there's no accountability with the driver. You don't know if they're actually a good person or they're going to treat you right. You're not sure if you're taking the best route or they're just trying to scam more money off of you. And then when you finally arrive, you have to waste time paying and figuring out a tip. It just takes so much time and effort that shouldn't have to happen. And that's why when Uber started to elucidate this problem, investors jumped on board. They were excited because they knew if there's this many pain points and the existing solution, the status quo of taxis, was so bad, there was an opportunity to build a truly world-changing startup. So the second part of your pitch is going to be the solution. This is where you're going to, as succinctly as possible, explain how your startup eliminates the problem you just explained. And that's the reason why it's so important to start with the problem. If you start off just talking about your solution, no one will have that emotional resonance to understand why this has to exist in the first place. Because a lot of times the investors you're going to pitch or the press you're going to pitch, they don't have that problem themselves. They don't work in that industry that you're trying to fix. And so they're not going to necessarily understand why it's so hard to live without your solution. And so by starting with the problem, it's much easier to explain why you have a solution that matters. And you want to express, instead of linear innovation, exponential innovation. This means that there's a huge gap between what already exists and what you can offer. And what I don't want you to do is say that you're going to be the next Facebook, that you're going to be the next Uber. As soon as somebody tells me they're game changing or they're going to shift the paradigm, I immediately just start ignoring them because I know that they don't truly understand what their own product is about. It's so easy to use crazy buzzwords and tech jargon, but you're really just going to confuse and dilute your pitch. So instead, it's critical. Use as few buzzwords as possible and just tell me, what's wrong with the world, and how do you make it better? And I think one of the most important parts of this is that you don't have to solve every problem at once. I think a lot of startups come out and they say, here's how we're going to be a $1 billion, a $10 billion, $100 billion startup by solving this huge range of problems. But it makes it really tough to find a wedge into the market and figure out what to do first. And you don't get the right critical feedback. If you build an exponential innovation, but you focus it on a specific niche target audience, what you do is you gain followers and enthusiasts for your startup who are going to work with you through all of the challenges. Because your product isn't going to be perfect on day one, and you need people who can tell you what is wrong and help you to build what they truly need. It's much better to have 10 customers who love you and will work with you through this process than it is to have 500 customers who don't really care about you and are going to drop you the first time there's a problem. And I think Facebook did a really great job of this because they weren't trying to solve the global ad market, be the world's top chat provider. They weren't trying to fix small business marketing or offer event listings. All they did was we offer social network profiles for Ivy League college kids in the United States. But by working on that very specific audience, they got the feedback that they needed to figure out what to do next. And that meant moving into chat, moving into the news feed. That meant expanding to teens and international students and eventually the entire world. And by building step by step, you can get to those adjacent markets that make a startup truly huge. If you try to do everything at once, though, you'll never know what to do next. And then the third step to a great pitch is your evidence. This is why your team is the one to succeed. You hear that ideas are a dime a dozen, and it's really all about execution. And so if somebody else has the same idea as you, why are you going to succeed and not them? Because as you can see, everything gets copied all over the world. A great startup idea, within a few months, there's going to be copycats somewhere else trying to do the exact same thing. And that's why you need your team to be the winner. And so that means explaining why you have a whole room full of PhDs on the subject, why your founders built and sold a company in the same vertical already, that maybe you've invented something that's patentable or is truly defensible, that you've got a natural moat to your product, that you've got incredible traction and early progress already. You've got the best investors who know exactly what you're going through and have solved these kind of challenges before, or you've created a way to offer your product much cheaper than anybody else. It's this kind of evidence that is really important, but also one of the most core parts of any startup pitch is the passion. This is why you are the person, not just your team, but why you are going to carry this to the finish line. Because as it turns out, most startups don't die from competition, and they don't die because they actually run out of money. The number one reason that startups fail is because their founders quit. It's because they just grow tired of the problem, and they're not the kind of people with the grit to stick through it no matter what. And that kills so many startups, because if the founders don't have passion, how are they going to inspire their teammates? And if you don't have passion in your pitch, if you're not the most excited person in the room, how are you going to get anybody else excited enough to give you money or give you their time? And so that's why it's critical to determine what is your superhero origin story. I think we've all heard the story of Batman. He was a kid whose parents were murdered by a robber in the mean streets of Gotham City. And so he grew up wanting to fix that city and clean it up and stop that crime. And you need to find your own similar story for your startup. Usually that's a formative experience that happened either in your childhood or at your last company. Something that frustrated you, that you didn't understand why it had to be that way. Something that you knew was wrong in the world and that you wanted to fix. And there's some amazing examples of this. My favorite is Jan Koum. He was the founder of WhatsApp. When he was a kid, his family moved from the Ukraine to the United States. And they were too poor to afford expensive long-distance phone calls to stay in touch with their family. Jan felt isolated. He was a new kid in a new country, and without the support of his family back home, he felt really alone. And he wondered, why does it have to cost so much money if it's just data being sent over a line? And so that's why he went on to build WhatsApp, a free messaging app that would let anybody in the world keep in touch with their family and not have to pay for it. And when he eventually sold that company to Facebook for $19 billion, he signed the acquisition papers on the steps of the welfare office where his family used to collect checks from the government just to survive. Some other awesome examples include Jack Dorsey, who built Square. You might know him from Twitter, but his other company, Square, stemmed from Jack's father, who ran a pizza place. And so when he was running this pizza shop, increasingly customers were asking to pay with credit cards. But at the time, it cost so much per swipe to be able to allow customers to pay with a credit card that 30 cents on a $3 slice of pizza was really cutting into their margins and hurting their family. And the family never understood, why should it cost the same to charge a credit card for a refrigerator as it does for a slice of pizza? And so Jack went on to build Square, which offered a flat fee, a small percentage fee, regardless of how much the item you were buying cost. And that meant that his dad and merchants like them could take credit card swipes for even tiny purchases. And that caused a huge boom in small business. Another one I really enjoy is Jonathan Downey. He was the founder of a drone operating system startup called Airware. His parents actually met when his dad was teaching his mom to fly planes at flight school. This kid grew up around flying vehicles. He built model planes and RC helicopters growing up, and eventually went to MIT to build autonomous aerial vehicles. And so when it was time for him to build a startup, people said, look, you've been building this your whole life. You're never going to give up on aeronautics and the idea of drones. And so even if the market doesn't look like it's there today, we know you're going to stick it out. And so once you have this formula, you're going to be asked a ton of questions in every pitch. And I'm going to break you down all the different questions that you're going to have to know the answers to. So the first one, that comes down to that evidence. Why are you qualified? What were you doing before this startup? How did you get this idea? Why do you have the kind of industry expertise and the special perspective to be able to solve this better than anybody else? Then, after you talk about the problem and where the idea comes from and what you're trying to solve, you're going to talk about that solution as we discussed already. Then, you're going to be asked, how do you grow? Is this something that you're going to be able to do do sustainably. A lot of companies, they say, oh, we're just going to use ads to grow. And that's not a sustainable method. Yes, there's always new ad platforms where you can get more affordable cost per clicks or cost per user acquisitions, but you're going to need to find ways to make your startup grow itself. You're going to have to build moments into your startup which are shareable, and you're going to have to build ways where you can loop in other people, where customers gain benefits by roping in their colleagues, their adjacent users, other people that they work with. And then how do you make money? Not only how do you make money today, but how are you going to make money down the line? This is where you're going to discuss how you grow into adjacent markets. Why, if you succeed in this, it gives you leverage to build the next product and the next market over and keep on aggregating those markets until you get truly huge. Who are your competitors? Now, some of you may have seen my talk yesterday, and I discussed this a little bit. It's so important in this step to be honest. It's extremely easy for startup founders to pretend like they don't really have any competitors. You can say, oh, well, what we're doing is totally different than what exists already. But there are always three types of competitors you need to watch out for. Those are the status quo, which is what people are already doing. Direct competitors, which is often startups or other businesses that are trying to do something the same way you are with a similar approach. And then there's incumbents who are going to try to move into your industry and take over what you're already doing. And rather than trying to lie about these or downplay them or omit them, it's so much better to methodically discuss who are your competitors and why are you better than them? Why are you different? Why is their solution going to fail? Why is the status quo outdated? Why are direct competitors taking the wrong approach? Why are incumbents too slow or too much rooted in a different business model to be able to chase after you? Then I always ask startups, what scares you? Because this is a great way for investors and press to understand, how do you think about the problem? Because if you pretend that, oh, nothing scares me, we're going to be great, there's nothing wrong with this company, I know that you're probably ignoring some of these festering problems that could kill your company one day. And so discussing what scares you, but why do you have a solution to it? Maybe you're saying, maybe we're worried that this one big competitor could move into us, but that's why we're hiring top talent from that company so we know what they're going to do and we can understand how to outwit them. Or you could say that, we're worried about this government regulation that could come in and stop us, and that's why, we're building these new policies and we're building into the loopholes that will allow us to continue to exist. Or we're hiring public policy lobbyists and former legislators who can help us to navigate that regulation. And then finally, what I always want to hear from every startup founder is, why is this your legacy? Why will you stop at nothing to solve this problem? Why will you never rest until your product succeeds? Because like I said, so many startups, they die by suicide, not by murder. And you need to be able to explain to somebody why it doesn't matter if you have to pivot your whole company and take a different approach. Why, if you have to start from ground zero, absolutely fire the whole team and start over with 0 employees, just you in your basement again. I want to know why you're still going to be committed to this company. But while it's super important to be able to create your own hype, you can't believe it. You need to express confidence, passion, and surety to everyone outside of your company, all of your potential investors, the press, potential users. But inside, you have to be candid about the true problems you face and level with your employees and your teams about why this is going to be a struggle, why you're going to need their hardest work and all their ingenuity to be able to solve this. Because if you're unwilling to be honest with your employees and your team, they won't trust you, they won't put in the hours necessary, and the company will implode. So now I want to talk about a few opportunities that I see as huge potential for new startups that are coming out across the world. So one of my favorite ways to determine new opportunities for startups is to look at, where are people spending a ton of money but hate the experience? When you look at a balance sheet for a family, where is all that money going, but they feel dissatisfied? And one of the top places we find that is in real estate and housing. People spend so much of their money, a bigger line item than anything else in your budget, on housing. But so many people feel like they're not living in the house that they want. It's difficult moving between apartments. If they do own real estate, it's a ton of work to be able to rent it out and manage it. And that's why there's a huge boom in property technology happening in Silicon Valley that I foresee happening soon around the world. Some really interesting startups in this space include Doorstead, which is guaranteeing people rent. If you want to rent out an apartment, Doorstead effectively takes over the apartment for you, does all of the repairs, the management. They find tenants, they interview them, they get them into your home, they take rent payments online, and they guarantee that you're going to get your rent paid every month. And instead of having to give a property manager a full month of rent ahead of time just to get them to fill your apartment, they just take a fee every month. And that means that that real estate owners can earn a lot more. Another is called Beyond Pricing, and this is using algorithmic pricing engines to determine how much housing should cost. And the big opportunity here is that banks don't have the technology necessary to be able to wind through all of the risk associated with offering loans or managing property. The amount of money on the line is so huge, and the bank's technology is pretty outdated, to be honest, that they're not sure that they're going to be able to recoup that money. And so you have new startups with better technology who are able to take on that risk in ways that banks can't. Another huge opportunity is in the future of work. I think we all know that automation is coming. Increasingly, robots and AI are going to take people's jobs. We might like to say that, it's just like the last industrial revolution where, people moved from farms to factories, but it didn't cause massive unemployment. But you got to remember that each time you when you built a new factory or you built a new machine, there was a unit cost associated with it. There was repair costs. Each single instance of a machine cost money for the producer. And that's not like AI today. Suddenly, you can create scalable products that each additional customer effectively costs zero. And so that means there's not going to be the same industry in building out the actual instances of those products or maintaining them the way there were for mechanics to be building and repairing machines in the Industrial Revolution. And so with that, we're going to see significant unemployment. So I think there's a massive opportunity right now in retraining programs and ways to take employees at one level of a business, maybe near the bottom, and train them to do the next level up in their job. Because they already have the industry expertise of working at that company or in that vertical. They just don't know the specific job that they're going to need next. Another big opportunity here is in job applications. There are so many people trying to find a new job, but they're scared. Nobody wants to go into a job application or an interview and get rejected. And so people stay at the same company for years and years, even though it suppresses their wages. And so there's a massive opportunity right now for new startups that teach people how to get better jobs, how to negotiate for better salaries. These are the same way that you've seen huge companies built in the test prep industry, like VIP Kid, which teaches English to Chinese students. There's a huge opportunity for job application training. Instead of just testing or learning how to take multiple choice tests, we're going to be learning how to do those job interviews. Give a great handshake. Give a great answer to what your biggest strengths and vulnerabilities are. And there's new models for monetizing these startups. These are called income sharing agreements, or ISAs. In this case, a company can say, hey, we will provide you education so that you can get a great computer programming job in exchange for you paying us 20% of your salary for the next 3 years. These new ISAs are creating incredible business models that are super lucrative for startups like Pathrise and Lambda School. And then another massive area that I think is going to blow up is the legal assistance space. So many people can't afford any type of legal assistance because it's just so expensive and so complicated. But a lot of the processes that are involved in fighting court cases, negotiating and signing contracts, or doing any type of real negotiation or legal work is repeatable. And so if you build technology that can do that over and over again, you can make it much cheaper and much more accessible. On the bottom end, you have a startup called Do Not Pay. And what they do is they'll fight parking tickets for you. They'll call customer service agents and negotiate better rates for you. They'll even help you get refunds if your plane was delayed. And they've even got a credit card that lets you pay for free trials of subscriptions. And as soon as the subscription tries to actually charge your card, they cancel the subscription for you. Those are incredible ways for the common person to gain more leverage and not get screwed over or scammed by the big corporations who have their own huge legal departments that all they do every day is work to screw money out of their consumers. And that's I think people need more assistance to fight back. And that's why one of my favorite features of Do Not Pay is when you call a customer service agent, they'll actually play this call is being recorded message, and they'll record the call for you so that if a company, like a cable company or a telecom, tries to abuse you, you can actually post that whole call on social media and shame them. And another great startup in this area is called Atrium, and they're automating all of the contracts and fundraising documents for startups. So it doesn't matter what you're building today, there are going to be new startups that make it much easier. The same way that AWS and Amazon made it easier to host your services, Atrium and new startups that I think one of you could build here in India is going to allow entrepreneurs to get up and running much faster so they can focus on what really matters to them. So I hope with this pitching rubric of the problem, the solution, and the evidence of those 9 questions and of these new ideas that you can go and be your own superhero. I'm Josh Constine. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Constine. I've got a newsletter you subscribe to, and I'm available for speaking gigs. But I really hope that one day I'll be writing about you in TechCrunch. Thank you guys so much for watching.